What if everything you've been taught about being a good leader is wrong? What if kindness, transparency, and being loved by your team are actually liabilities? That's the argument from one of history's most infamous books on power, Niccolo Machiavelli's The Prince. It argues that to be successful, a leader has to be prepared to be cruel, deceptive, and even feared. Today, we're going to break down 5 of its most brutal and timeless leadership lessons. Written way back in 1513, The Prince was Machiavelli's masterpiece, born from the chaotic world of Renaissance Italy. He wasn't some scholar in an ivory tower. He was a former high-ranking diplomat in the Florentine Republic. He'd seen power up close, how it's won, how it's kept, and how it's lost. After the powerful Medici family came back to rule Florence, Machiavelli was kicked out, accused of conspiracy, tortured, and exiled. It was from this rock bottom that he wrote The Prince and dedicated it to the new ruler, Lorenzo de' Medici. Essentially, it was a job application, a handbook on how to rule from an expert hoping to get back in the game. We're not sure if Lorenzo ever even read the book, but it certainly didn't get Machiavelli his job back. But the ideas he laid out have echoed for over 5 centuries, giving us the word Machiavellian. It's a term often slapped on anyone seen as cunning and manipulative, but that's a bit of a simplification. Machiavelli wasn't just writing a guide for tyrants. He was describing uncomfortable truths about leadership in the world as it is, not as we wish it would be. So let's explore the raw, pragmatic, and often unsettling wisdom he offered, by looking at his lessons as solutions to problems every leader still faces today. Let's begin. Every leader knows the world is unpredictable. Market crashes, political shifts, new technology, a pandemic. These are all versions of what Machiavelli called fortuna, or fortune. He imagined fortune as a violent river, a chaotic force you can't stop, but one you can prepare for. And that preparation, that's where his first big concept comes in, virtù. Now, virtù isn't virtue as we think of it. It's not about being a good person. It's a mix of strength, skill, courage, and shrewd adaptability. It's the uniquely human ability to impose your will on the chaos of fortune. A leader with virtù doesn't just get lucky. They actively shape their own destiny. They build dams and levees when the river is calm, so that when it rages, they can channel its power or at least survive the flood. This radically separates leadership from conventional morality. Machiavelli is crystal clear on this, saying a leader who wants to survive must know how to do wrong and to make use of it or not according to necessity. He believed that a leader who tries to be good all the time will be crushed by the many who aren't. So the real test of a leader isn't their goodness, but their pragmatism. Do you have the skill and the stomach to do what's necessary to protect your company or your team from the whims of fortune? Think about a CEO navigating a supply chain crisis. The crisis itself is fortuna, the external, uncontrollable event. A leader without virtù might panic or just hope for the best. But a leader with virtù would have already diversified suppliers and built resilient systems. They'd have the decisiveness to pivot their whole strategy overnight. They understand that clinging to an old plan might feel right, but it could lead to the company's ruin, which is the ultimate failure of a leader. That's the core of mastering your fate. You can't control the wind, but you can control the sails. Here's a problem that feels like it was ripped from today's headlines. In a world of social media and snap judgments, how do you maintain your authority? Often, the perception of your actions matters more than the reality. Machiavelli nailed this 500 years ago. He wrote, Everyone sees what you appear to be. Few really know what you are, and those few dare not oppose themselves to the opinion of the many. He argued that for a leader, appearing to have good qualities is often more important than actually having them. He's not telling leaders to be reckless. In fact, he says a leader should try to appear merciful, faithful, humane, and religious. The key, though, is to have a mind so prepared that, when it is necessary not to be so, you can and know how to change to the opposite. This isn't just PR, it's psychological control. The masses are always taken by appearances and by results. And since most of the world is made up of the masses, their perception becomes your reality. A leader who is truly merciful all the time might be seen as weak, but a leader who appears merciful yet is known to be capable of swift and decisive action when needed creates an aura of both kindness and strength. Their reputation does the hard work for them. Look at the corporate world. A CEO might publicly champion social responsibility and a caring company culture. That's the appearance. It builds the brand and attracts talent. Behind the scenes, that same CEO might make ruthless decisions, like laying off thousands to protect the bottom line. According to Machiavelli, as long as the public image holds up, the few who know what you really are will be too intimidated to challenge the opinion of the many. The lesson isn't just to be a hypocrite. It's to understand that managing your image isn't a soft skill. It's a core instrument of power. Now for the classic Machiavellian question, the one debated for centuries. What's the best foundation for authority? Is it love or is it fear? Machiavelli's answer is famously unsentimental. Of course, he says, you'd want to be both. But since it is difficult to unite them in one person, it is much safer to be feared than loved. His logic is based on a pretty grim view of human nature. Love, he says, is held by a chain of obligation which, since men are wicked, is broken at every opportunity for their own utility. In other words, love is fickle. Your team might love you when things are great, but that feeling can vanish when tough decisions are needed. Fear, on the other hand, is sustained by a dread of punishment which will never abandon you. Fear is simply more reliable. But, and this is a critical warning that people often miss, a leader must do everything they can to avoid being hated. Fear is about control. Hatred is what sparks a rebellion. To be feared is to have your authority and the consequences of crossing you respected. To be hated is to make people want revenge. Machiavelli's instruction is clear. A leader avoids hatred by keeping their hands off their citizens' property and their women. As long as a leader isn't seen as greedy or unjust, the fear they command is a source of stability. So what does this look like in an office? The loved boss avoids conflict and wants to be friends with everyone. That's fine in good times, but their authority can crumble when they have to enforce an unpopular rule. The feared boss, in a Machiavellian sense, isn't a screaming tyrant. They're the boss with incredibly high standards who holds everyone, including themselves, accountable. You might not love this boss, but you fear the consequences of not performing. That fear creates discipline and gets results. The key is that the standards have to be fair and the consequences just. If the boss becomes vindictive and cruel, if they become hated, the best people will leave and the rest will undermine them. Love is a bonus, but a healthy respect for consequences is the bedrock of authority. Every leader is isolated. Information gets filtered on its way to the top. This creates one of leadership's most dangerous traps. How do you get the truth? How do you know if advice is honest or just what people think you want to hear? Machiavelli saw this as a plague. He said courts are full of flatterers because people are so easily deceived by them. Flatterers praise every decision and shield you from hard truths. It feels great, but it's poison because it robs a leader of what they need most, the truth. His solution is a carefully structured middle ground. A wise leader, he says, must choose a small group of intelligent advisors and give only them the freedom to speak the truth. But even then, there are rules. They should only speak when the leader asks them to, and only on the subjects he brings up. The leader should question them upon everything, listen to all the opinions, and then form his own conclusions. The final call is his and his alone. He concludes that the first way to judge a ruler's intelligence is to look at the people he has around him. This is a masterclass in managing advice. A CEO who surrounds themselves with yes men creates an echo chamber that will lead them right off a cliff. On the other hand, a leader who just lets everyone debate endlessly projects weakness and indecision. The Machiavellian ideal is a leader who is secure enough to pick smart people who will disagree with them, but who also has the wisdom to control the process. They actively seek out dissent, weigh it carefully, and then make a firm, final decision. They know the responsibility is theirs alone, but the quality of that decision depends on the quality of the truth they can get from their team. The final problem is all about timing. Opportunities disappear and threats grow. A leader who hesitates, who waits for perfect information, is always one step behind. In a world that moves fast, indecision is often worse than a wrong decision. Machiavelli's solution is absolute. A leader must be decisive and adaptable. He put it perfectly with the line, "The wise man does at once what the fool does finally." Both might reach the same conclusion, but the wise leader acts immediately and seizes the advantage. The fool waits until they're forced to act, by which point it's often too late. This decisiveness has to be paired with adaptability. A strategy that worked yesterday might be a disaster today. Machiavelli said, "A successful leader must be like a fox to recognize traps and a lion to frighten wolves." They need the cunning of a fox to see when things have changed, and the strength of a lion to act boldly on that new reality. This points to a radical embrace of pragmatism over any fixed principle. We tend to admire leaders who stick to their principles, but Machiavelli would see that as a potential flaw. For him, the only principle that matters is the security and success of the state. If that means breaking a promise or abandoning a failing project, so be it. All courses of action are risky, he wrote, so wisdom isn't about avoiding danger. It's about calculating risk and acting decisively. Imagine a startup that's poured millions into a new product, only for a competitor to launch something better. The indecisive leader doubles down out of pride, the fool who admits defeat only after the company is bankrupt. The Machiavellian leader adapts. They're the fox who recognizes the trap of sunk costs and the lion with the guts to kill the project and pivot the entire company. They understand that in the race for success, speed and flexibility beat stubborn consistency every time. So, to recap the 5 big lessons from Niccolo Machiavelli. First, shape your own destiny by developing virtù to conquer the chaos of fortuna. Second, understand that perception is reality and manage your image. Third, build your authority on fear, not love, but never let it turn into hatred. Fourth, surround yourself with truth-tellers, but control the conversation. And fifth, act decisively and be ready to adapt, because hesitation leads to ruin. If you found this deep dive into power and leadership interesting, make sure to like this video and subscribe to the channel for more on history's most powerful ideas. The reason we still talk about The Prince is that it forces us to ask uncomfortable questions about morality versus effectiveness. Machiavelli's world isn't a nice one. It's a world where good intentions aren't enough to survive. He separates politics from traditional ethics, arguing that a leader's number one job is the stability and security of whatever they're leading, and the methods used to achieve that are secondary. So I'll leave you with a question. Is Machiavelli's advice a necessary evil for any leader in a competitive world, or is it just a cynical excuse for tyranny? Can you be a good person and a truly effective leader in his terms? Let me know what you think in the comments.